Hey everyone, our final project is about overcoming obstacles as seen through the different tellings of Cinderella. To introduce our topic, we are talking about how Cinderella's stories are centralized around the idea of a grand romance that requires obstacles to overcome to be able to achieve the romance in the end. This is demonstrated in quotes from readings from When the Clock Strikes, Sexton's version of Cinderella, and the Disney film version of Cinderella from 1950. In these different examples, you will see the different obstacles that Cinderella endures to be able to reach her dream prince in the future and in the end of her story. It is necessary for her to be treated poorly and for her to struggle in the beginning for her dream to come true in the future.
Example where we found Cinderella overcoming obstacles was through the Cinderella 1950 Walt Disney film. The first quote that we took out of this film was, "Nonsense, child, if you've lost all your faith, I couldn't be here, and I am here." This scene in the movie shows a vulnerable moment for Cinderella as she has lost all her faith from how she's been treated throughout her life and her past trauma. Here we see her fairy godmother reassure her that she will be okay and overcome her pain, pointing to that she still has faith in a better future. The second quote that we found of Cinderella overcoming obstacles was, "No matter how hard you are grieving, if you keep on believing, the dream that you wish will come true." This quote also connects to the previous quote I just read, as Cinderella is reassured again that if you have faith and keep believing in yourself, your wishes will come true. This is an important quote to analyze because it shows that throughout the hard times, you may grieve and feel those feelings, but at the end of the day, you will overcome those current obstacles, and with belief, your dreams will come true. This is later shown on in the movie when Cinderella leaves her abusive family and finds her prince. The last quote that we found in this film was, "Cinderella, Cinderella, night and day is Cinderella. Make the fire, fix the breakfast, do the dishes, and do the mopping." With this specific quote from the movie, we see how Cinderella is in charge of anything and everything within her household. Even night and day was referenced to allude that she's always working and catering to her stepmother and stepsisters without a choice. It's obvious to notice the frustration one must gain from this never-ending torture, but nonetheless, Cinderella would always do what she was told. This was until she got sick of the bossing and overcame her doomed fate by leaving them behind.
When the Clock Strikes by Tanith Lee. First quote, "Listen to me, my daughter," she cried, "and listen carefully, for the minutes are short. If you do as I tell you, you can escape their wrath, and only I need die. And if you live, I am satisfied, for you can carry on my labor after me. My vengeance I shall leave you, and my witchcraft to exact it by." In the context of this story, this is a big obstacle that Ashella must overcome. When her mother is killed, it leaves the whole operation to her. Initially, Ashella uses her newly uncovered beauty to get the prince to notice her, but then uses her dark magic to seduce the prince. And then this kind of leads into the second quote. "I am being foolish," said the prince to Ashella on the terrace, "but perhaps I am entitled to be foolish just once in my life. What are you saying?" For the girl was speaking low beside him, and he could not catch her words. "I am trying to spell to bind you to me," she said. "But I'm already bound." "Be bound then, never go free." "I do not wish it," he said. He kissed her hands, and he said, "I do not know you, but I will wed you. Is that proof your spell has worked? I will wed you and get back for the rights you have lost." This quote taps more into the love aspect of the story. While all the people viewed her as just an ash-covered girl, she reveals her true looks to the world during the ball, and the prince is the one who now truly knows her for who she really is. And then quote 3. "His true daughter, the mad one. Nobody bothered to tell her about the invitation to the palace. They knew how she would react, mumbling in her hair about the sin and penance, paddling her hands in the greasy ash to smear her face. Even the servants avoided her, as if she were just a cat seated by the fire. Less than a cat, for the cat saw to the mice, just a block of stone." With her appearance, she was deemed the mad and unapproachable daughter. This did not help her case at all when it came to the invitation to the ball, due to her automatic assumption being negative. With her appearance, the way that she is perceived, and the lack of care from those around her, she was set up for failure finding love. Despite all of this, she knows her plan is flawless and cleans up to finish what her mother started, and that is seducing and killing the prince.
Another tale of Cinderella that we found that shows her overcoming obstacles is Cinderella by Anne Sexton. Our first quote is, "I forced pain, would someone like her father who had done nothing, nothing whatever, to help her and never would. Even when I beat her, even as I beat her." Much pain was inflicted on Cinderella in this version of the story, mental but also intense physical pain, creating a large physical obstacle for her to overcome and escape from. Especially when no one close to her, namely her father, would not help or could not help, and she had to face all of this on her own. This shows her personal strength as she kept fighting through all of this. Our next quote is, "Her father brought presents home from town, jewels and gowns for the other women, but the twig of a tree for Cinderella." Similar to the first quote, Cinderella is isolated and alone in this story, practically on her own. Her obstacle here is a little different than the first, however. This quote shows how often she handled burdens on her own. Normally, family is a main support system for people, and her family tore her down. By giving her low treatment and everyone else special treatment, her family is continuously building an obstacle for her to try to overcome. This shows her resilience in her life, never letting them ruin her happiness. Our last quote is, "Her stepmother threw a dish of lentils into the cinders and said, 'Pick them up in an hour and you shall go.' 'No, Cinderella,' said the stepmother. 'You have no clothes and cannot dance.'" This quote supports the idea that her stepmother and other family members only tried to make her life harder. This obstacle was critical as they limit her chance to go to the ball, giving her no choice in her own life. She has to overcome the obstacle of having no control here. She thinks she has no options and keeps getting told that as well. This also shows resilience as strength, as she is at her lowest before the ball, and still pushes through once she gets a slight bit of guidance from a dove, which gives her what she needs for the ball. Throughout this whole story, she overcomes countless obstacles, once again.
Secondary source, Cinderella Longs for the Fairy Godmother by Margaret Clenk. This source is a short story about an impatient girl named Enid who loved the fairy tale Cinderella. She connected with the tale because she recognized some of her own struggles in the stories. Motherless daughter who was left with the responsibility of taking care of the household and deal with cruel stepsisters. The only difference between Enid and Cinderella's was that what Enid wanted was not at the ball with the prince. She yearned for the encounter with the fairy godmother herself. The feeling of finding lost love, understanding and sympathy, and connecting with a truly gentle soul. Although Enid didn't find a love match by overcoming her obstacles, she found love in herself by coming to terms with her childhood trauma. And some quotes to help back up the theme. Enid shared the character of Cinderella's sense of being abandoned and then made to work, to be expected to suffer and to abide in the system. And she was fixated on somebody loving her and transforming the situation by hearing her sorrow and finally bringing happiness to her. When would her suffering be rewarded? The heroes or heroines of fairy tales are abstractions, that is, in our language, archetypes. Therefore, their fates are not neurotic complications, but rather are expressions of the difficulties and dangers given to us by nature.
In conclusion, we see that these three Cinderella versions, Disney's, Lee's, and Sexton's, all share the theme of overcoming obstacles in both alike and unalike ways. All versions revolve around a magnificent love story concept where conquering challenges is needed in order to obtain a romantic ending. Cinderella perseveres through difficult struggles throughout her journey and is rewarded with finding love. All stories hold the same interpretation, working hard through obstacles for a magical ending, Cinderella falling in love with her prince. Each narrative tells its own version. Lee's powerful, Disney's timeless and classic, and Sexton's raw and touching. All in all, in the three versions, Cinderella navigates through various challenging obstacles that all result in her happily ever after with her prince in the ending of each story.